Here is your African true story. Africa-wide. Africa land injustice and how Europe still benefits from land grabbed from the indigenous people of Africa during colonization. At its most fundamental level, colonialism is premised on exploitation of colonized peoples, their territory, and resources. The acquisition of new lands and natural resources was thus paramount to the colonial project. It provided colonizing powers with wealth and strategic advantages that allowed massive empires to flourish, furnishing raw materials and markets that fueled industrialization. Indigenous African people were treated as objects that needed to be subjugated, removed, or eliminated in order to exploit their labor and guarantee unfettered access to their lands and the productive use of resources. This separation of indigenous people from their natural environment was a crucial component of colonization, one that persisted in land grabs, displacements, violence, landlessness, and human rights violation. The control of lands and resources was vital to the colonizers as a strategy for accumulating more wealth, territorial influence, strategic access to resources, and cheap labor that allowed empires to flourish. They forcefully displaced, used, or eradicated indigenous population in order to have access to their lands. This separation of indigenous people from their territories or the autonomy over their territories was a crucial component of colonization. The ways in which colonizers imposed their control over land differed from one colony to another or differed by the type of resources they were interested in according to the geography of the colony. They also often changed throughout the colonial period. In the wake of this colonial land grab, companies and wealthy settlers associated with the colonizers appropriated enormous tracts of land and established their business operations. In Africa, European colonists also granted vast land concessions to private companies. In fact, all major colonial powers on the continent used that strategy in order to expand their territorial control. By the mid-1870s, European colonialists had made claims to most parts of Africa. The most notorious case was arguably Belgian's King Leopold II's rule of the Congo Free State, which was his private colony for more than a decade. Within Africa, concessions existed in French, British, Belgium, German, and Portuguese colonies, including Angola, Botswana, Central African Republic, Cameroon, Chad, Gabon, Malawi, DRC, Mozambique, Namibia, Nigeria, Tanzania, Zambia, and Zimbabwe. While the form of concessions varied widely, a common element was the primary purpose of concessions owner to extract resources in the cheapest way possible. They were assigned powers that are typically associated with governments, such as monopoly over violence and the ability to tax some colonies. For example, all of Zimbabwe was granted as concessions to the British South African Company. Additionally, the concessions were often granted in resource-rich areas. Extreme labor exploitations, together with coercion and violence, was a primary condition for these companies to accomplish exorbitant profits with the concessions. In sub-Saharan Africa, concessions to private companies were characterized by co-opting local institutions, replacing uncooperative leaders with complicit ones, and creating ruling lineages. With these tactics, concessions instituted a series of local strongmen who often continued to dominate village politics. This is especially the case where concessions for monoculture plantations were established. Non-complacent leaders or rebellious chiefs were usually held captive, replaced, shamelessly degraded, or even murdered. Compliance with the rule of co-opted leaders was then achieved through extreme violence. As the European presence was mostly confined to the respective capitals and coastal cities, their ruling via co-opted chiefs and institutions characterized most of the continent. While destroying local institutions, leadership, and the soft fabric, Europeans employed a variety of strategies to oppress the many resistance struggles and rebellions. These included forced labor system, extortion-level taxation on peasants, subjugation, and mass massacres. All of these conveyed deep consequences on today's politics and organizations. The British government, for example, has been criticized for forcefully and violently evicting local communities from their lands in order to create tea plantation for the empire. The Kipsigis and Telai clan of Kericho County, Kenya, were brutally evicted by the British Army between 1895 and 1963 to make way for lucrative tea plantations owned by white settlers, which benefit them up to this day. Britain pursued an intentional policy of violent displacement after realizing the land in Kericho County was suited to growing tea. Starting with the Crown Land Ordinance of 1902, 36,000 hectares of land in Kericho is alleged to have been taken from the Kipsigis and Talai and given to white Europeans. The land is now still occupied by various British and multinational tea corporations. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, follow, share, and like our video. It's the best way of supporting us. And remember, Africa is watching.